Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to the Procurement Games Podcast and open conversations where we pose the question, is the field ever leveled in our favor? Of course, we are talking about procurement and contracting of minority, women, and veteran-owned small businesses deemed to be the underutilized firms in government and private corporation contracting. So, my name is Arlene Pingle, and I am a proud Filipina-American entrepreneur. I lead Mackey Company, a strategic consulting organization focused on procurement supply chain management. We basically help government agencies and private companies design race, ethnic, and gender-conscious contract policies and procedures. More importantly, we help folks like you build capacity, capability, and sustainability. We hope that with the stories we share of entrepreneurs like yourself, that you learn a thing or two to help you strategize for the win. Each week, we feature a minority, veteran, or women-owned small business, and once a month, we feature a trailblazer who is paving the way to help move us forward in this ever-challenging and changing world of procurement. Today in our show, I am excited to have Foster Hackett III, President of ADC, Advanced Design Contracting, located just outside the Twin Cities in Minnesota. Right, Foster?
That's correct. We're currently located in Blaine, Minnesota. It's about 20 minutes north of the cities.
Awesome. So how are you?
I'm doing good. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Having a blast with this podcast that we've launched in November. So what I'd like to do is get to know you a little bit so our listeners understand your background and how you came to be Foster Hackett III and what brought you into this industry.
I guess I came about from a good, strong, loving mother and father, mixed race. My mother being an immigrant from Mexico, and my dad born and raised here in Minnesota of predominantly German descent. I guess the best way to call it is back in the 60s, there were a couple of hippies that got together. And I got to grow up here in Minnesota, grew up on the Lower East Side off Payne Avenue, which is at the time and still is a predominant area of immigrants today. It's always faced its social economic issues down there. To grow up, I got to learn a lot from it, and I understood where I didn't want to stay in life. So I studied, I worked hard, and through all of that, I was able to start a company. First started out going to junior college, thought I was going to be a cop, decided against it. At a young age, I realized that Mayberry did not exist, and I would be dealing with pretty much the worst people that the city has to offer on a daily basis, and I'm not built for that. So I got out of that. I didn't know what to do. Loaded up my pickup truck without any direction and headed to Texas. I started building houses. Thought about going back to school, but I didn't know for what. Enjoyed building. I enjoyed the math. I enjoyed the mechanics of it. Found out I actually have a pretty mechanical mind. I put things together. I build things, not necessarily just structures, but even my business. So when I came back to Minnesota, joined the local unions, went through trade school, enjoyed my time there, made good money, but it wasn't as fulfilling as I wanted my life to be. So I started to build a company and basically worked 2 jobs for a lot of years, and then went out on my own 100%. And this is where I'm at today.
So what was the inspiration to switching gears from being a worker to, hey, you know what, I'm going to just dive into entrepreneurship?
No, a lot of it had to do, I had to eat. I was hungry. The recessions were bad. I was working maybe 5-6 months out of the year. So I went and got my builder's license. I started contracting on my own, started out doing residential work, found out I was pretty decent at it. And then I was making more money with my business than I was working for, today who was my competitors. Yeah, so put the future in my own hands versus letting somebody else do it. I always, I kind of joke with a lot of guys, and a lot of my friends that are still in the trades and stuff. And, my whole goal in life is I just wanted to work 40 hours a week and go home and enjoy my family and things like that. Mm-hmm. And, here I am now. I average probably 55, 60 hours a week. It's meaningful, but it is the life of an entrepreneur. If you're not ready to work a minimum 50 hours a week, stay wherever you are and enjoy your living. I mean, I made a good living doing what I was doing, but I just needed more fulfillment. I needed the challenges, and I figured at the end of the day, if I didn't succeed, I could always put my tool belt back on and go back and work for somebody else.
So I hear, though, wonderful things that have allowed you to excel in entrepreneurship and the advantages. What was the win for you?
I guess I like building things. Again, I'm a mechanic. I enjoy to step back and see what I've built, whether it's a job that we just finished or pulling up to my where my business is and seeing my vehicles there with the logo and seeing everything that I've accomplished thus far. It's actually really amazing. We have a 10,000 square foot warehouse. We employed this last summer roughly 25 employees out in the field, average between 4 to 5 in the office. That's a lot. I mean, I didn't come from parents who had a business background. Blue collar. My father was a mechanical engineer. My mother was a retired postal worker. That's where I got a lot of my work ethic from. So I didn't have anybody to teach me in the beginning how to get started. Now since then, a good friend of mine who works for me, Randy Hamburg, he's really mentored me a lot in business, and he's taught me a lot. And I've met some other good people along the way who've helped me amongst many organizations in and of itself.
Sure.
Yeah, I'm very fortunate.
Let me backtrack a little bit and ask you, what is advanced design contracting?
So when I first decided to name my company, I didn't know what I was going to name it, but I wanted to come up with a name other than one that my mother gave me, right? Because everybody they name their companies after themselves, this, that, whatever. And there's nothing wrong with that, but I wanted to come up with something. So I didn't have a lot of money, didn't have any money, but I wanted to be on the first page. So I said, okay, letter A, right? But I didn't want to paint myself into a corner with the name of my company. So I wanted to be advanced, and then I figured design and contracting. So it allowed me to move in just about any direction at any given time. If construction didn't work out for me, I could get into design phases. I could get into facility management. I could get into a lot of different aspects of business in and of itself. So that's how I came up with that name. Naming your company is definitely something that you should think about and when you come up with it. And it should be as original as it can be, because that way people remember it.
I understand the generalization of the name. Mm-hmm. What do you focus on primarily?
I was doing a lot of residential in the beginning. As basically a residential general contractor. On my trade side, framing houses from the ground up. When I came back home and went to trade school, I went into sheet metal. So we did various things from stainless steel to HVAC to architectural sheet metal. You kind of coincide, you're working with roofers a lot. It's a lot of the sheet metal work. We do a lot of the flashing, finish features with commercial roofing. And now I have my own sheet metal shop, which every day I'm still growing and adding to it. And it's about 90% complete. There's a couple pieces of equipment I need to do and some other stuff on the business side. We're going to be making our own panel system here shortly. That's how we got into doing the sheet metal and roofing. Now, we've done some GC work for some of the local cities in St. Paul and Minneapolis with the park and rec boards, and we've done some work on the military bases here locally. We did some GC work on smaller projects. I'm not timid or scared to go after larger projects. I just do it with in mind that I got to make money. A lot of people see large numbers and they think they're going to make a lot of money, and when the job's done, they're actually in the negative. I just don't want to get into a big scale. We definitely want to be able to have the ability to take care of our customers.
You mentioned earlier that you are a union shop. So tell me some deciding factors. When did you become a union signatory? Why did you become a union signatory?
We became a union shop from the beginning. As soon as I went out 100% on my own, I became a union shop.
Is that because you were into trades that you thought, the union was the way to go?
No, that's not the reason why, actually. I would actually probably have more work being non-union, more opportunities to chase a lot of the big box stores and things like that. You could pay lower wages. A lot of the non-union, not all of them, but a lot of the non-union companies in my industry, they, how would you say, basically don't pay benefits. So they're able to pay less. They put a decent amount of money on the check, but then they 1099. So technically they're not employees. They're able to cut a lot of the insurance costs and things like that. So it's what makes it hard to compete against them also. But there's a couple of reasons why. To know in the back of my mind that I provide these same benefits and retirement packages to a lot of the employees I have today. Well, all the union employees that work in the field have it. Office is different. They have simple IRAs and things like that. But roughly 60% of my employees are immigrant from Asia, actually, from
That's
Burma.
Awesome.
And they didn't have these benefits either. Everybody wants to come and work at ADC because I pay well.
Yeah.
And
you take care of them. And we take a lot
of that for granted.
Yeah.
A lot of people, if you go and work for particular corporations, you fall under their benefits plans and things like that. But in the trades, it's not very common. In Minnesota, it's a little more common than outside. But if you go to a lot of your right to work states, if they don't have to pay benefits, they're not paying them. Trust me. It's the right thing to do.
Sure.
To treat people fairly, to treat them what they're worth.
And it's been advantageous, it sounds like.
Being a union contractor does has its advantages, absolutely. You do play in a different sandbox, if you will. Generally, they're larger jobs, mostly municipalities, whether it's state, federal, or local cities. And you do still compete against non-union. They're generally larger contractors that you compete against, so they have real costs. They're paying insurance, they're paying prevailing wage and things like that. So big part that makes it advantageous for me is the quality of the employees I get. Mm-hmm. Generally, if you're working for a non-union contractor, by the time you get to be about 25, 26 years old, you start realizing you don't have benefits, you don't have retirement, you don't have things like that, but yet you might be the foreman. Where am I going to be in 25, 30 years?
Absolutely.
So they jump ship. They come into the union. The union doesn't go around trying to cherry pick guys off of jobs. Sure. The guys go to the union hall and then they get trained, not just in how to do the job, but they get trained in OSHA safety, job site safety. They get trained in foreman training. I love that about the sheet metal union. I could go back and, take continuing ed classes if I wanted to go into stainless steel work, if I wanted to go into welding, AutoCAD, TAB.
Capacity.
I could expand my capacity. So
you got capacity building into union, you got the training and education into union, and then you've got the fringe benefits that actually help, take care of the household.
Correct.
Right?
Yep. And then on top of that, once you learn your trade, if there's no work in Minnesota, you could pick up your tools and drive to California. You could drive to New York. You could go. That's why they call it journeyman. You have tools, we'll travel.
Yeah. With regards to what ADC does and how successful you've been. And obviously I want to talk about successes and I want to talk about failures. So let's start with, the failures usually happens during the early stages where you're still trying to grow, the growing pains, right? So there's those failures. But then there's we started getting the money and then, did we mismanage it? Did we manage it right? Were we chasing? Were we not chasing? Where were our struggles during that second stage? And then obviously right now you're in the scaling, right? You are scaling and expanding opportunities and such. I'm going to let you take lead on, which one do you want to dive in first?
Let's start with success. Okay. It's the easy one, right?
Right. That's always fun to talk about that one.
We've done well. We've been able to purchase buildings, purchase equipment. It looks great. But with more zeros comes more headaches at the same time, right?
Right.
And I'm still learning every day. So as I grow, I always have a failure. There's always, it's kind of like the 2 steps forward, 1 step back cliche.
Is that the should have done that?
Should have done that.
Could have done that.
If it would have, could have, should have. Yeah. So, and even at, the bigger you get, the more affected you are. Everything's magnified. So when you do make a mistake, you feel it more. And it's typically financially.
Absolutely.
Everything from employees quitting during the Great Resignation to trying to train the new employees.
Sure.
To did I spend too much money on equipment last year? Or should I have bought a different accounting system? Should I have, all the things that you look back and reflect on. And
realize how much money you spent on them.
Oh, my gosh.
And the return.
Yeah. Once you get an accountant in your office, then you start to realize how much you bleed out, meaning money you've lost or misused, mishandled.
Sure.
And you're like, wow, I didn't even pay myself that last year.
Right.
And that's how you make more money too.
Sure.
But you have to pay that person
to do that.
It's
funny how you say that's how you make money too. That's what I call finding money, owning a business and things like that. What I see the most are the quick tools, the hammers, the screwdrivers, the wrenches. Mm-hmm. And you end up with a truck full of the same size wrenches, the same size screwdrivers because you forgot.
Yeah.
Right? And you ran to Home Depot, you ran to Lowe's and grabbed another set because you're always going to need one. Right?
Yeah, adds up really fast.
It adds up really fast. And that's just one set of screwdrivers. We haven't talked about the type of screwdrivers that are available out there. And I think for construction companies, their internal inventory, many of us don't really keep track of that. We can find money by controlling inventory.
Absolutely.
And we can find money with understanding the performance. Right? How long is it going to take me to hang wallpaper or paint this wall and productivity rates? I guess is what I'm really trying to say here, is the productivity rates.
Yeah. And right now I'm trying to learn this thing they call it gap financing.
Gap financing. That's right.
It's a new terminology for me that my accountant's teaching me.
Yes.
And I will learn it.
It's
And
like a bridge loan.
I'm learning the importance of it.
Yes.
Really fast. When to buy, why to buy, when not to buy. Schedule out your finances.
Down to when you send your payment in so that the credit report reports accurately, you know? Yeah. Understand when they hit. It absolutely all matters, because when the bank looks at it at any given point in time, that snapshot of your financials may look phenomenal, but then your credit score doesn't reflect it. The money in your bank account doesn't reflect it. And it's very, very important managing my money and timing payments, timing receipts. And, you know, in the construction industry, we perform the work. We don't necessarily get paid the next day.
No, we don't.
Right? Yeah. And the gap financing, or the bridge loan funding, that's going to be the critical win for construction companies, to understand where their money goes internally and what opportunities are out there.
Yeah, and when you do figure out your financing, and now you're paying 1 or 2% less on the money that you borrow, though 1 or 2 doesn't sound like a large number, at the end of the year, it's tens of thousands of dollars.
Right.
Gap financing is extremely important. Yeah. And just think your average small business is probably doing between 1 to 5 million. You're losing anywhere from 10 to 50,000 just in an interest.
Yeah. Well, what I love about what you're talking about here is that as an entrepreneur, 14 years in, you're still learning.
Every day.
Right. The fact that you're open to that, to more ahas. You know, a lot of us get comfortable doing what we're doing. Hey, you know what? We're just going to do the grind. And if we can grow 10%, 5%, 10% more than last year, it's a victory. It's a win. But it has to go beyond the dollars that goes in the bank or the contract values that you get. It's also development of the business infrastructure.
Absolutely. And the one thing I learned about contract value during COVID and the social unrest, it changes really quick when there's no materials, when there's lack of employees. You know, you do your project projections as you're estimating, and
sure.
Well, all of a sudden your material costs went up 30%. That's a big ouch.
It's a big change order.
Yeah.
If for both sides of the fence, if you can get that material, yeah.
If you negotiated it into your contract, there's contracts out there. There's businesses out there that did not negotiate price changes into their contracts because they overlooked it.
Right. Or they don't do the inclusions and exclusions, saying subject to change based on market rate, right?
Yeah, I mean, my bids used to say that I would honor them for 30 days.
And now?
I'll honor it on the day of acceptance.
No, I absolutely understand where that alignment comes into play with what you're talking about here. Let me pivot a little bit. You know, we talked about the successes. And I know the financing obviously is one of the failures, right, along the journey.
Oh, yeah.
During those first couple of years as a construction company, and this is to our listeners who are thinking about, hey, I want to start a construction company. I've been grinding for this guy. I can do it one better. I've got better customer service, better quality of work. I can do this. Let me start this. So tell me a little bit about the pitfalls so that we can help our budding construction companies out there. And then, then you went to the next level, right? You grew. Yeah. Oh, yeah. And what were some of those pitfalls? What did that look like?
So I guess my first failure, or if you want to call it failure or mistake, is I assumed that all my employees would work as hard as me. And there's some hardworking people that work for me. Don't get me wrong.
Sure.
But nobody's going to work in your business harder than you. And if you're not working harder than your employees, you're not going to make it.
Absolutely.
So be ready to grind.
So you're telling me I can't do Netflix marathons every?
No. Turn Hallmark off.
Okay, it's, darn.
I've definitely faced a lot of financial failures and mistakes that I've done. Keeping up with the cost of running a business is hard.
Yes.
It really is.
Did you go out and buy equipment?
Yes and no. So you have your minimal equipment that you need, right?
Sure.
So what's kind of interesting, when you get to start from scratch after working for who are now my competitors, but at the time my employers, and what you got set in your mind, what you're going to do, you're already paying attention, like what could you do better at their place? And of course, their biggest mistake is they never listen to their employees.
Sure.
And I make sure I do. Doesn't mean just because I listen to your ideas, I'm going to do it, but I'm willing to listen because I don't know how many times I've told my past employers, we should look at doing something like this, and to give you the old, we've done it like this for 100 years,
we've done it
and it
before.
still works.
And it didn't work, so we're not going to do it.
We're not going to do it
That's
again.
Right.
So I just always say, okay, fine. So I'd go on, I'd do whatever I had to do. So now when it comes to tools and equipment, when we got started, it was minimal equipment, minimal tools.
That's awesome.
I relied on a lot of suppliers to help me out. I paid extra cost for renting tools in the beginning before I owned them, because I started out of a garage at my house. I didn't have a place to put a forklift.
Yeah, but you built relationships to
I did.
ensure that your suppliers stepped up when you needed them. Your equipment rental companies, stepped up when you needed the forklift, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And one of the things that I always think about in that relationship build is, especially in construction, right? It's that going that extra mile is selling your story so that those that are controllers of the equipment and the supplies can actually help you. Because if you don't build that, I think that's where some of us falter. We just, because we know how to do the work.
Right.
But we don't bother to build that infrastructure, that relationship to say, hey, can you make sure that I get, my light bulbs, my sheetrock, my whatever, and what will it take for me to get that? Is that like a volume of 1,000 units sold, or what is it? It's truly understanding, what makes you tick, so I can meet me halfway, right?
Yeah. So
that's relationship.
Here's what it boils down to. It's no different than when you're in grade school. Everybody wants to be on the winning team. So when you're out there, you're grinding, you're working hard, and you treat people right, first and foremost, they want to help you succeed. A lot of people do. I would purposely go to the person that wasn't, how would you say, on the in crowd. And, I could pick these people out. And I would go up to them and I'd give them my business. I would start talking to them and, build a relationship. And that person actually worked harder for me.
Well, one of the things that I think about as, again, minorities, women, veteran-owned small businesses, we have to look at how they would want to work with us and we would work with them. Mm-hmm. And I think giving the shout out to the suppliers and the equipment folks and how they've chosen to really help. If we walk in there with they're not really going to help me and they're in it to take my money, yeah, that's going to reflect really easy in your conversation. Whereas, again, if you're slightly vulnerable and slightly transparent and say, look, I'm working on a government contract, working on a private thing, this is where it's going to look like, and we may flex between January and February, and I need that sweet window for you to work with me. Can you do it? I mean, some of these, are favors, right?
Right.
Others are really about relationship. Oh, I trust Foster. I know he's going to deliver. We're going to extend that. And I think their intent to help is sincere.
You have to help them as much as they help you. It's a give and take relationship. You talk about failures. Growing up in the inner city, being of mixed race, you're always on the defensive. You take it from both sides. But that was definitely one of the biggest failures I had in the beginning of business, was getting people to like me. So I said, I better hire some people and let them be the face, right? And I'll just handle
now, did you have a chip on your shoulder?
I wouldn't call it a chip.
Yeah.
Growing up in the inner city, what some people may call a chip or a bravado, if you will, especially being of a Hispanic background, people see it differently. A lot of it is, I'm a product of my environment. I don't lack confidence. If I did, I wouldn't be here. Let's just face it. Now, it's not necessarily saying like I'm egotistical either. We all have an ego, right?
Sure.
But I was definitely raised different than the typical Minnesota kid out in a suburb.
Now, let me ask you this. Is that because you positioned yourself to know before walking in?
I didn't go in blind,
Yeah.
or at least I didn't think so. A lot of it is it's strategy and not knowing when to quit. Here's a good story. You want to know how I become who I am, how I can't quit, how people say, you have a bravado, this, that, or whatever. Freshman year of high school, going to play football. We're doing two-a-days. A lot of my friends are quitting. I went home and I told my mom I wanted to quit because I didn't have any friends left on the football team, right? Mind you, I'm telling this to my mom, who's about 5'3" and
100 pounds wet.
yeah, right. And here I am, the big macho kid and stuff. And my mom slapped the shit out of me. She one-timed me, and I think it still stings. And she
just take once to remember.
Oh yeah, and she pulled me down right into her face, and she says, "I don't raise quitters." Mind you, I'm talking to a woman who's been working since she was 4 years old, picking strawberries, and worked her whole life, worked her way through college, started raising kids at a young age. To this very day,
that resonates.
It resonates, and I can't quit.
Yeah. Well, I can see the pulling you down to her eye level.
Oh yeah.
That probably to me the
it was
most
the ear.
powerful.
She grabbed the ear. It was anybody who's Latino knows what I'm talking
That's
about.
Right.
Mom grabs that ear and you follow.
That's right. You have no choice. Between dad and mom striving to push you guys and elevate you forward, it's hard to look back and go, I should have quit. To you, it's a forward. We're moving forward.
Absolutely. It's been a perpetual motion ever since, and I don't think it's ever going to stop. I ended up finishing all 4 years playing football.
Wow.
Made new friends, great experiences in life. Got into wrestling. Playing these sports in high school taught me a lot.
Yeah.
Taught me about drive, taught me about achieving, working hard, setting goals, which still resonates to this day. So, there's those moments in your life where you could really turn one way or the other and you don't realize it till you're older. But that was definitely that day.
Well, that might be why you have the word advanced, because you're always going to take that step forward. Right? Yeah, you're always going to advance. You're not going to go back. And there's always something meaningful that impacts our lives, that tells us or that inspires us to go, I'm not doing that. I'm going to go the other way. I've said this in my podcast, entrepreneurs, you're either, rich and you're going to just go for it, go start a company, or you want to do your existing employer better or try to improve. And the third one is we just jump off.
Just go. It's a mentality.
First, right?
And what everybody should realize, too, is it's okay to fail.
Absolutely.
Because at least you tried.
Yeah.
I couldn't imagine going through life ever wondering if I would have done this, I should have did that. Like I said earlier, if I fail, at least I know I gave it my all.
Sure.
Like, I know, it would hurt, but I'd dust myself off and I'd get back up and I'd go on to the next chapter of my life.
But failure is a learning lesson. However, there's a risk mitigation, right? You're going to do your darndest to ensure that you don't even get to close to fail, right? And when you do get there, that's when the learning truly, truly happens. But every step of the way, I look at failure like this. If I can mitigate it to about 60 to 70%, before I make my first error, I'm doing pretty good.
You're doing really good.
I'm really good, right? Rather than every 10% you're falling,
fails. Everyone
right?
fails.
Yeah. So it's defining it.
It defines it, and everyone fails at every level. I don't care what you're doing, whether you're opening up a business or
baking cookies.
Lord knows I can't bake. I stay away from the kitchen.
Or installing a toilet. Tried to do that the other day.
Yeah, but I guess at the end of the day is don't be scared to try.
Absolutely.
And just because you fail, it doesn't mean that you didn't succeed.
Sure.
At least you can keep your head up and know you tried. I would suggest everybody take your calculated risk. Like you said, you talk about mitigating things. You mitigate through calculated risk. Don't bite off more than you can chew. I did residential construction for a long time before I decided I was going to go after the commercial.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with staying in residential. I contemplated staying in residential. The difference between residential and commercial is the box is bigger.
Sure.
That's really what it is. But with the bigger box comes bigger risk, bigger reward, so on and so forth, bigger headaches. But it's a lot easier, in my opinion, to manage a residential construction company just because of the way that they're set up and run and the way your competition is. But they're also the companies that go in and out of business more than anybody else.
Let me take a step back here and hit our last topic and go back. Procurement Games is about the games being played, whether it's private contracting or government public contracting, and talked about leveling the playing field and what does that truly mean, and that it's different for each entrepreneur. So when we go macro, what's going on in the industry? What are the roadblocks, right? Maybe we should flip it and say what's working in the industry, and then we can highlight what isn't.
I equate a lot of this industry stuff to, you ever see the movie Hunger Games?
Yes.
where they pit people against each other and then they don't win until they actually work together.
That's right.
That's pretty much where we're at in business as minorities.
Well, it's funny that you say that because that's kind of what procurement.
We're all hungry.
That's right. What Procurement Games is all about, right? And
I've got
I've got to credit Jared Peterson with Straightforward for helping me come up with the name of the podcast, because added to that is, is the field ever leveled in your favor, right? And Hunger Games are the games. Right?
It is.
So when you think about it from that perspective, our goal for the podcast is to unite our voices so that it resonates, because everyone is saying the same thing, and they're just not here in Minnesota. They're not just in construction. They're nationwide.
The interesting thing is, like we talked about, the movie Hunger Games is very similar to construction industry. We're pitted against each other to compete against each other in many fields in business. But if and when we ever did come together, basically at the end of the day, everything boils down to politics. It doesn't matter if you're right, if you're left. At the end of the day, the only thing the politicians care about is votes. Like as minorities, if you wanted to get the attention of the government, or whether it's city, state, or federal, a good way to look at it is a lot of the Asians in the state of Minnesota, they figured it out really fast, and so have the Somalis that have a newer wave of immigrants that have come in the last 15, 20 years. And what they did is they got out and voted. They're a voting bloc. I could drive by where they do the elections or where they go to vote at the local high schools, and you'll see people of the Asian descent coming in on buses. Elderly, young, old, it doesn't matter. That's right. Hey, you going to do business with us, Mr. Government? You want us to vote for you? You're going to do business with us. You don't need to be $1 billion.
People power.
Yeah. At the end of the day, the reason why the people who are running for elections, there's two things. They either need money from one person who gives a large source of income, at some dinner party or whatever for funding campaign contributions. But that money, what's it spent for? It's spent for votes. Right. So they want to get as many votes as they can. And the best thing you could do is be a voting bloc. If all the minority contractors in the entire U.S. got together, that's hundreds of thousands of people. That's a voting bloc.
That's a huge bloc.
So now,
well, even if we just go per state, right, in the state of Minnesota.
Okay, great. So we're electoral elections, right?
Yeah.
Federal side. State of Minnesota, just within the metropolitan area alone. If we all got together and said, you want our vote, we want you to listen to us.
Yeah.
I guarantee you'd get to meet somebody for the first time ever.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
The unions do a good job of that. We talked about me being a union contractor. When I was a union employee, guess who I got to meet when I would go to the union meetings? Politicians. And there might only be 20 or 30 of us at the union hall meeting that night.
That's what you represent.
But it's what we represent.
That's right.
It was a voting bloc.
That's right. Well, and united, we're stronger. Anyway.
Oh, absolutely.
Right? United, we're stronger. And I think that's the goal, is if we're talking about the same thing, saying the same thing, somebody's going to realize it. And now it's a matter of, we know where to go to find the money. We know who controls the purse strings. And so now the pressure comes on. One of the advantages here is being able to influence in a positive way, not storm the castle kind of way, right? Because that's just not going to work. We have to come in.
TV.
Yeah, that's just great for TV. It looks great.
Terrible first podcast, good for TV. Do you know how many branches there are to the government? Not to put you on the spot.
3.
Most people will say 3 if they studied civics. I say there's 4.
Okay, what's the 4th one?
So you have your judicial, your legislative, and your executive. 4th one's K Street. It's the lobbyist.
Okay.
And that's, at the end of the day, those are the people who pay the money for the campaigns to run. Those are the real influencers of the world, if you will.
Sure.
Behind the scenes that nobody knows who they even are. So that's who it is. And if they're able to do it with money, and they're using that money to buy your vote, whether you realize it or not, what's that vote worth to you?
Sure.
Now, us as minority contractors, we got to realize one thing really fast. It's worth nothing to us because all the money that they've spent, none of it's meant for us.
Right.
If you look at the total dollars that are allocated for the work that we do, and they're not special projects. These are infrastructure jobs we do.
Right.
We work on the park and rec buildings. We work on state buildings. We work on MnDOT. We work on the federal buildings, okay, as contractors, or at least we should be. I work on them personally. And I know of other minority contractors that do, but
the percentage share
that we get is
ridiculous.
Minuscule.
Absolutely.
It's next to nothing.
Absolutely.
It's barely a speck on a pie chart.
Well, and one of the things that I think about is this infrastructure bill that's coming down the pipe. State of Minnesota is slated to get 6.6 billion.
Yeah.
I think something 6 billion.
I just
at
need
least
a couple million.
But what's our portion of that 6 billion that we are insured to get? The policies are not written for us
It's
to
not
get.
defined for us.
No. It just says we're going to have a goal, an aspiration.
Yeah,
That
but not a
says,
requirement.
but I think united, that's what we need to be vying for. And that's 6 million here in Minnesota. What's it in it? I mean, I think Texas got a big one. California's got a big one. I mean, what are the voices that we can use for them? I mean, they got a bigger population. Maybe they got a better plan. We need to unite in that voice to go, we need 10%. 10% of 6 billion is a lot of small businesses that will succeed. Foster, it has been a pleasure having this conversation with you. I always find it enlightening to hear your thoughts on succeeding in this realm of construction industry. To our listeners, I hope you learned a thing or two about drive, calculated risk, and coming together to become a stronger voice, and more importantly, vying for a piece of this massive infrastructure bill coming to our states. We have to have a strategy to win this. Otherwise, minorities, women, and veteran-owned small businesses will miss out. Please remember to smash that like button and share your thoughts and comments about this, because we need to make this a priority for both workforce and entrepreneurship. Finally, don't forget to go after that low-hanging fruit, but always remember to look up at the tree filled with fruit ready to ripen. Until next time.